Hello everyone, I'm Łukasz Malinowski, the Internet of Things advisor and trainer. Today, I'd like to talk with you about how to become an IoT consultant. Of course, this is very subjective because everyone got their own journey. So that's why please share your journey in the comments. Please comment on what I am suggesting because I've got very specific perspective. I will present that in a second, and I would really like to your perspective as well. Before starting, please just say hi, that I know that you are out there, you are listening to this live stream, and I do hope that I will bring a lot of value for you, no matter if you are just starting as an IoT consultant or if you are already established professional. Hello, Sean. It's great to have you with us. You are for sure the established IoT professional, so please contribute. Please provide your experience. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining. So without further ado, let's start. Together we will go through the journey. Part of the journey, this is my own journey. Part of is journey of others that I helped. But let's focus on how to become an IoT consultant. And I will start with my own personal journey. So I started as a developer. That back in the days, PHP, MySQL, all of that stuff, that would be considered the full stack nowadays. Then transitioned into solution architect, into the IT consultant and project manager, then IoT consultant, and finally IoT advisor and trainer. So as you can see, this is more the IT type of path. It is not very much hardware related. I was always interested in hardware, though it was never my main focus, to be honest. So this is first thing that you need to be aware of. And if you started your path from the hardware perspective, please share your thoughts and experiences. So having said that, what does it even mean to be an IoT consultant? I think before we agree how to become one, we need to know what's the target. And what I will provide, this is my personal subjective opinion. If you do not agree with me, that's perfectly fine. Just share your thoughts in the comments and I'm open for discussion. But from my personal perspective, before we can even talk about an IoT consultant, we need to agree on the anatomy of an IoT project, because the IoT project itself defines in a way the members engaged in that project, and one of those is the IoT consultant. So without going into much more details, typical IoT project looks as following. We've got devices, sensors and actuators. So sensors essentially gather data from the environment, and actuators can impact physical environment. Then we've got edge gateway, which is typically a bit stronger device than sensors that sits between our local devices and cloud backend or on-premise backend. Of course, the edge gateway itself is optional. We don't have to use it all the time, but this is a piece of the puzzle. And regarding the backend infrastructure, we can use on-premise infrastructure. That means that you need to work with physical servers or cloud backend, which makes things a bit easier because you've got virtual resources, but that also adds some additional complexity. So this is very high level. And of course, the data flow, so from devices to our backend, and command flow from backend to devices. This is very important to ensure security of the command flow, because we do not want anyone to mess with our equipment. So this is simplest setup of the IoT project I was able to figure out. And having said that, who is involved in IoT initiative? I already mentioned a few roles, but let's try to make it as broad as possible. And if you are in one of those roles, please comment so I know the audience, and I would really like to know your perspective. So if any of those roles, this is something that you are already in, please let me know. If this is something that you're after, let me know as well. Maybe I will be able to help you achieve your goal. So starting from the left-hand side, we've got the hardware designer. And IoT, the thing, which is the thing, this is something that is very interesting for me personally in the Internet of Things, because we work with the actual hardware that can impact our surroundings and that can get data from our surroundings, which is very, very interesting. Then we've got the embedded developer. So the person that is able to write firmware on this hardware, because this hardware needs to be controlled by some logic, and embedded developer, this is typically a role that is responsible for creating that logic. Yeah, so Sean, you are mostly solution architect. That was my main background as well. So this high-level end-to-end view, not necessarily going very, very deep on the hardware side, but yeah, I think this is a very good starting point if you are a solution architect, or if you end up to be the solution architect, and I will explain that in a second. But let's go further. We've got IT and network administrator. And that person, this should be also the security architect. And this is very, very important, because that person needs to establish the local connectivity. For instance, if we are talking about the industrial Internet of Things deployment, we need to create local infrastructure, local network, local firewalls, proxies, all of that, in order to establish the connectivity. As the same is true for the on-premise backend, and even for the cloud backend if you're using the virtual machines. So we need basically old school IT administrator to manage all of that. Then we've got the edge application developer. And this is the position that is kind of in between the device part and the typical IT part, because that person typically is using different set of tools than the embedded developer, but is responsible for creating the business logic the way that embedded developer creates it on the embedded devices. This person creates that logic on the edge gateway, essentially gathering data from various devices, doing some pre-processing before sending data to the cloud, potentially also executing some edge logic and machine learning inference. Then we've got a cloud developer. So someone that is responsible for establishing the cloud infrastructure, the cloud backend for our IoT system. And that person needs to know some things that are specific to IoT, and we will cover them later, and some things that are not necessarily that specific to IoT, but this is basically to create secure backend infrastructure. We also got full stack developer. This is someone that creates applications running in the cloud or maybe on the on-prem backend system, essentially creating a user interface, user frontend to all of the device side of things, so people can leverage that, access data, send commands to devices, and basically work with the solution. Then we got a solution architect. And solution architect is basically someone that is responsible for having the whole thing working end to end, and to be sure that decision at every stage is proper one from the security standpoint, from the cost standpoint, from the scalability standpoint. Lastly, we've got more business roles. So the project manager that is responsible for delivering all of the things that we've got here on time and within the budget. And we've got the business stakeholder that is responsible for a number of things, from defining requirements to organizing budget for the whole initiative. So why am I talking about all of that if you want to be just an IoT consultant? Do you really need to know all of those roles that are involved in the project? Well, from my personal perspective, you do. because as an IoT consultant in the IoT initiative, you are responsible to communicate and to understand with every single role that I mentioned here. And it might be obvious, but I remember my first presentation that I gave to the board members of a pretty significant enterprise. Then I understood how different my view is from what they are looking after, from what they are worried about, and what is important for them. I thought it. I know that. I thought it is something that I was aware of, but I was very, very wrong. So as an IoT consultant, you need to be able to work and to communicate with all of those roles and respect the way that they work. So how do they work? I grouped those roles into three domains. So first, we've got developers. Developers, hardware engineers, hardware designers, cloud infrastructure architects, all of that. So those person got very domain focus, right? So if you are hardware designer, you're focused on designing hardware. If you are a security consultant, you are focused on the security type of aspect of your specific initiative. Those professionals typically got very, very deep knowledge because they are experts in their respective fields, and they've got low-level perspective, and they can guide you through every single detail of the solution, having that be hardware, firmware, or software part. So when you work with them, you need to respect their focus. But what about other roles? Then we've got the solution architect. And the solution architect, this is the role that demands end-to-end focus. So as a solution architect, you need to have wide knowledge, but high-level perspective. There is no way to have this domain expertise as those experts if you work as a solution architect, because that's just too much of data, too much of knowledge, too much of experience that you would have to gather. That's why as a solution architect, you need to have the end-to-end focus, wide knowledge, but high-level perspective. And finally, something that was most difficult for myself is working with the business representatives, because they are focused on outcomes over functionalities. They don't really care about the functionalities that we implement on all of those levels below. They expect outcomes, and their perspective is totally different than the technical perspective. They are focused on business. They are non-technical customer representatives. I think this is something that summarizes their focus best, that they really care about the outcomes, about providing business value to the end users, and you need to respect that, and you need to communicate with them appropriately, totally different than when you communicate with the, for instance, firmware developers. So those are the very, I would say, high-level approaches those personas take. So developers typically think about the how, so how to implement something in a secure, scalable way. Architects and end designers, they are interested into what. So what type of functionalities we need and how to connect all of those pieces together. But the business owners, the business stakeholders, they are focused on why, right? So they are focused on why we are even building all of that and what business outcomes can we expect to deliver. Of course, this is a huge simplification, but I wanted to make that here, so it shows the focus of all of those groups, and of you as an IoT consultant, you need to really be aware of that. So then let's say that you are in one of those three roles. and you like to become an IoT consultant. So essentially, you are one of those personas, and you want to switch your focus to become the IoT consultant that is responsible for the end-to-end delivery of an IoT product or service. So if you start as a domain expert, so that might be hardware engineer, firmware engineer, developer, IT admin, you should, first of all, in my opinion, you should get out of your comfort zone and accept that you won't know everything. So let's say that you know everything about the cloud. That's probably not true because this is just too big domain, but you're a cloud expert. And if you want to change your focus to hardware, you need to get out of your comfort zone because in a cloud, you work with virtual assets, but when you work with the actual hardware, you work with physical assets that are easy to break and not that easy to recover compared to the virtual assets of the cloud. So this is something that I strongly suggest. And that was, for me, one of the biggest challenges to accept that there is no way for me to be an expert in all of those domains, even though I'm still trying to achieve that. If you are a solution architect, so first of all, I think you should respect the hardware constraints because as a solution architect, you draw UML diagrams, you can design beautiful systems, but then theory meets reality, and in that conversation, often reality wins over theory. So as a solution architect, if you want to go more into implementation area, for instance, you need to respect hardware constraints and you need to be aware that if something is great design in theory, that doesn't have to be true for the real deployment, unfortunately. Finally, if you are a business owner, if you are a project manager, and you would like to switch your focus a bit to become the end-to-end IoT consultant, well, you need to get your hands dirty. So you need to start designing things, then you need to start building things, and along the way, you will face the implementation challenges. So similarly to the solution architect, something might look easy when you think about it, when you create some very high-level concept, but once you start implementing, it is not that easy anymore. So this is the way that I look at it, things. If you're in those roles, those are the things that you need to be aware of, and probably those are going to be your biggest challenges at the very beginning. So now we've got the main question. Are you still interested in being an IoT consultant? Once you know what you are up to, are you really interested? And you need to decide for yourself if you are interested or no. And if you're not interested, then this is basically it, right? You don't have to worry about all of those aspects that we just covered because, yeah, you let's say you just want to be an IT administrator because you love that. You don't want to go out of your comfort zone. That is perfectly fine. But what if you decide that you're up to the challenge and you want to become an IoT consultant? So how to start? And this is the way that I propose you start, because I started in very similar way and it paid off for me. So hopefully it will pay off for you. Start with what you're interested the most and basically then extend your focus. So here we've got a few examples that I put together. Let's say that you're a hardware designer. So as a hardware designer, you might learn how to write firmware that will run on your own hardware, because you know the hardware very well. So writing firmware for that hardware should be in your reach. And once you've got some basic functionality, basic logic running on your hardware, then you can extend it, for instance, to add capability to your firmware to communicate with the cloud backend. And all of a sudden, you've got everything covered, and you've got the end-to-end view into the whole system. If you are an IT admin, for instance, then you might switch your focus a bit from the servers to edge devices, because edge devices, they've got the constrained resources, so you need to change the way that you interact with that hardware, but it is still kind of similar to what you're doing on your day-to-day job. And once you understand the nuances of edge devices, then you might try to take next step, which is the app development. So you learn how to code, you learn how to write application logic that can run on the edge devices, and also potentially this logic can run on your backend on-premise infrastructure. So this is something that should be doable if you're IT admin. And on the flip side, if you are application developer that works with virtual devices, with virtual resources, maybe you can try to leverage your skills to write an app on a specific edge device. Once again, you need to respect the constrained resources of that device, but that should be within your reach. And at the end of the session, I will show some tools that help you get there. And once your app is running on the edge device, you can proceed forward to learn about IT administration. So how to create a local network to be secure, how to maybe configure some firewalls, how to add routing, all of that stuff that as a developer probably don't really care about. But if you want to extend your impact, this is something that I would propose. So the same theme, get out of your comfort zone and accept that you won't know everything when you're starting, but like you will not know everything even after you way advanced in the IoT stack itself. Respect hardware constraints, because this hardware is totally different than what we've got in the cloud, and get your hands dirty. Basically, start to implementing things and see how that's going to work, because you will learn a lot during the implementation stage. But what if you do not know where to start? Let's say that you are at the very beginning of your journey, you do not have any specific background yet, and you just want to know where to start. Well, for that, there is also a way that I propose, but once again, this is something that is very subjective, and if someone else who've got an idea, please share in the comments. So I propose that if you do not know where to start, try to find someone to follow that already is ahead of the journey. You might find, for instance, some podcasts like this one. It is just some random podcast. Actually, it's not random podcast. It's my podcast where I interview a number of different people that are already way ahead in the IoT journey, and I think those might be very good source of information. If you are interested in Internet of Things using AWS Cloud and AWS Cloud both as a backend and as a services running at the edge, you might consider to reading my book on this topic, because it covers basically everything that you need to know when you are just starting. And as you can see, the table of contents is pretty broad, and that should help you to get started in a very organized way. So this is, of course, pure advertisement from my perspective, though I do believe that those assets will bring value to you. But what if you don't really want to go through that path? You just want to learn from yourself. That's perfectly fine. And what I suggest is you consider starting from Dhaka. And that might feel a bit weird at the very beginning. Why should you learn Docker if you want to be IoT consultant working with edge devices, with actual hardware, and all of that stuff? Well, Docker gives you quite a bit of playground to start with that allows you to go into details and into various aspects of the actual IoT deployments. So first of all, you can leverage Docker containers to create a fleet of virtual devices. And that would allow you to try to manage fleet of those devices using on your laptop. You can spawn as many of those as you wish and try to solve challenges in managing fleet of devices. You can kill some of those containers to emulate that there are some issues with, let's say, the battery or maybe network. So this is something that is very, very helpful. Then you can leverage Docker to design and implement complex systems. So essentially what you're doing is you are building a few Docker images that represent various parts of some complex machinery or maybe various parts of the production line. And then you can create a network between those. So the IT admin approach, you can create edge gateways. So you will learn how to establish that. And of course, you can deploy applications to any of those containers. So that gives you a great playground without purchasing any hardware and without investing in basically any infrastructure. Then you can also simulate the end-to-end scenario. And this is a sample scenario that I covered, where we've got the on-premise infrastructure with some isolated network that is not exposed to the public internet. We've got edge gateway that sits between that on-premise infrastructure and the cloud backend, and we've got cloud backend itself that can be cloud that can be container running in a cloud, or that can be just a Docker container running on your laptop that emulates the cloud part. And actually, this example is available on GitHub. So you can review that. Just please be aware that what I described here is a bit outdated regarding the technology, because that was 4 years ago, and there are some versions that are not longer supported of what I proposed here, but the general concept is still valid, and I think that will provide tons of value to you. Basically, try to implement that isolation between the private network, between the edge network and the external system, for instance, AWS Cloud or whatever else. So this is something for sure that would be very, very interesting to get started. And Docker enables all of that. So that's why I do recommend, if you do not know where to start, or if you already started and you feel kind of limited in terms of how you can experiment, this is for sure something worth trying. So speaking about communication, because here I briefly touched on the communication between the on-premise network, edge gateway, and the cloud itself. The communication in the IoT, this is pretty important topic, because we need to somehow access those remote devices, and those devices need to somehow work with the backend systems. So those are the protocols that I think you should start with. For sure, this is not the complete list of protocols and communication options available for IoT, but based on my experience, those are the most popular and gives you very, very good starting point. So first of all, MQTT. I'm a huge fan of MQTT because it enables that many-to-many type of communication. So we've got a number of MQTT clients that subscribe and publish messages to the MQTT broker, and those messages can be then received by further clients in the cloud, on-premise, or maybe both, because the MQTT allows you to send one message from the client and deliver the same message to number of different subscribers. So this is very, very important. Here you can find a link to the MQTT web page, and I also added link to MQTT specifications, because there are a few versions of MQTT that you can find in various engagements, and having the overall understanding of what changed from version 3 to version 5, I think this is pretty helpful, and maybe a bit of history why the MQTT does not have explicit version 4 is also an interesting story to follow. Then we've got the RESTful API. And RESTful API, this is something that is typically used on the backend, right? So our application or our system expose secure APIs so other applications can interact with it. But those APIs can also be used by our remote devices. And in some cases, you cannot use MQTT, then you might think about building the REST API. And if you're interested in this, this is a pretty good article covering what RESTful API is and how to establish that communication, how that communication looks like. So I strongly recommend that you go through it. It is provided by AWS, but it is not AWS specific. So I think it's a very good resource. And finally, we've got OPC Foundation with the OPC UI. And this is something that is more focused on the industrial IoT. So if you work with factory equipment, probably you will OPC and OPC UI, and learning that protocol, how to use it to establish communication between various devices and your edge gateways. This is also very, very important, though once again it is mainly for industry and not necessarily for that broad use as the MQTT, for instance. Okay, let's proceed with our journey. And I promised to show the tool stack that I'm using on my daily activities. And without spoiling anything, unfortunately, I do not use any super cool tools. I use very basic tools to achieve what I need. And I think, yeah, you just need to create a stack that works for you and that allows you to implement solutions that are expected by your customers and by your customers of those customers. So those are the tools that I'm using. I'm using Python as the main programming language because it is very easy to understand even for non-IT participants of the IoT initiative. So it is just easy to explain the main concepts, and it is very versatile. You can write to the application logic, the backend logic, and do way more things with Python. By the way, if you are just starting and you would like to learn Python, I recommend this Python 3 bootcamp that covers basics of Python in a very nice manner. So I strongly recommend going through that. I'm not the author of this Git repository, though it is very, very good. I also recommend Python because you can use it to write logic on devices. You can leverage MicroPython, which allows you to use Python syntax and write logic on very, very smart hardware. To be very honest with you, I'm not really sure if I would recommend using MicroPython for actual production deployments. The last time I checked, there were a few security concerns with how the MicroPython implement various features. Though if you are just starting and you want to be able to create that end-to-end flow, I think MicroPython is a decent tool to have. And I also often use Jupyter Lab. Jupyter Lab is something that allows you basically to mix the source code with Markdown documentation and with dynamic dashboard. So I use this tool during trainings that I deliver, during presentations, and also for demonstration purposes to business stakeholders. I think this is very, very nice tool, mainly used by data scientists, but I use it to manage IoT infrastructure, and it works just fine. Then we've got something that is specific to AWS, because I've got a bit of history with AWS. If you would like to work with other cloud provider, then unfortunately you need to find tools that work for that. I'm pretty sure that you will be able to find, but if you decide to start with AWS, I highly recommend using AWS CDK, which stands from Cloud Development Kit, because it allows you to manage cloud infrastructure using various high-level programming languages, Python included. So what do I store my time series data? It is very case specific. I use AWS time stream in some cases, and in other cases I use basically the PostgreSQL database to handle time series data, because it really depends on the way that you want to consume that data later on. So this is something I can tell you without going into details of the actual use case. If you've got some actual use case, feel free to message me with what you try to achieve, and I will be able to help. But yeah, I would start with time stream if you've got the AWS backend, and if not, then PostgreSQL database, because there is well, yeah, it's great for local the development. That is correct, but you can also use a hosted Postgres, for instance, in AWS, right? And then you don't really have to worry about the scalability anymore. And you've got the option that if you decide to switch from AWS to other cloud provider or on-prem solution, then you can pretty easily switch if you are using this database. So that is what I would recommend. Going back to the CDK, what is important about it is that it allows you to manage your AWS resources using those high-level languages, but I would say that you use CDK to manage your static infrastructure. So your servers, your Lambda functions, API gateways, all of that. But you typically do not use CDK to create AWS infrastructure that represents IoT devices, because you might have hundreds of thousands of IoT devices, and you will hit limits of AWS CDK, or actually the AWS CloudFormation that is generated by CDK itself. So to manage dynamic AWS infrastructure, I do recommend AWS SDK for Python. Well, once again, Python. So as I told you, I try to keep things simple and use a single language to achieve various goals. That might be the application development, but also managing of the cloud infrastructure. And the AWS SDK for Python, called Boto3, allows you basically to invoke low-level AWS APIs using Python code. And this approach opens up the potential to manage huge fleet of IoT devices. When you've got hundreds of thousands of devices connected to your system, then you probably want to manage them using bot-free and for on-demand actions that need to change the AWS infrastructure, the SDK for Python, that would be something that I recommend. Okay, now something trivial. So the code editor, I use VS Code, but I'm tempted to switch to Eclipse FIA, which is essentially the replacement of VS Code. This is purely for personal reasons. I have not switched yet because TIA is at the early stage of its development, but I think that is a valid alternative. Something very important, once you start playing with all of those technologies, you will generate quite a lot of source code. That might be the configuration, that might be application logic. I strongly recommend using Git to version all of that, even if you are the only developer for that specific project. And a number of times I changed something and that caused some very, very unexpected outcomes. And without having things tracked in a Git repository, that would be very hard for me actually to recover from that mistake. So I strongly recommend that. If you are new to Git, there is a free PDF version of the ProGit book, which basically guides you from zero to hero on the Git functionality, how to use it as a developer. I strongly recommend that. For diagrams, I use Draw.io, and this is basically the tool that you see on my screen. I think this is very, very good tool to create various diagrams, various designs. It is free to use, works in the browser, and yeah, it is just a perfect tool for me. But before you can design anything, probably you should learn UML, which is the language that we use to model various abstractions, both regarding the software and hardware, the business use cases, all of that. So I suggest UML as a good starting point, and then BPMN, which is also focused on modeling, but from the business process perspective. So as I told you before, as an IoT consultant, you will interact not only with technical people, but also with business people, and being able to design business processes, or at least understand existing business processes documented using the BPMN notation. I think this is pretty important. Regarding the communication, I said that I'm a huge fan of MQTT, and this is a very versatile tool. I highly recommend the Mosquito by Eclipse Foundation. This is both the MQTT broker and client, so you can use it to facilitate the MQTT connectivity, and you can use client int provide to emulate devices. I use this tool very frequently for prototyping purposes. When I host a training or during conferences, I use Mosquito to show how the MQTT communication looks under the hood. I was speaking about creating APIs. For that, I use Postman. That is a great tool to build APIs. So to build the interfaces exposed by your backend, and those interfaces can be consumed, for instance, by the devices themselves. Of course, I try to experiment with new tools, like with new models. My personal opinion is that we are not there yet regarding usage of those models. You need to know what you want to achieve using them, and you need to carefully validate the outcomes, though they help to get started and to have maybe some basic template in place. But then you need to fine tune it yourself. At least this is my experience. And of course, Docker, this is something that I already covered. I think this is great tool, not only for experimenting and for learning phase, but also once you are already established IoT professional, you will use Docker for various occasions. So this is the tool stack that I'm using. And if you would like to receive this material with all of those links, please subscribe to my newsletter at thinkrex.com, and I will send you a PDF version of the materials that I shared today with all of those links. So do you have any questions? Because this is the time for Q&A, and I'm happy to answer any. I do not see any questions. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or on YouTube. If you've got any questions, put them in comments and I will get back to you. That's all that I prepared for today. So thank you very much for attending this live stream. I hope that it was interesting for you, that it showed you how to leverage how to enter the IoT space, both from the organizational perspective and from the technical perspective. Thank you, Sean. Thank you so much for attending. I will get back to you for that time series data. Let's talk about it offline. So once again, I would really like to thank you all for attending today's meeting. Let me know in comments if you found that interesting, if there are any topics that you would like me to cover in the future, and I might organize another live stream for that. Take care. I'm Łukasz Malinowski, the Internet of Things advisor and trainer. Bye-bye.